Hi friends, my name is Nandita. I am from Andhra Pradesh.
Good morning dear students. Today we are going to discuss about locomotion and movement from chapter 20 biology class 11 CBSE syllabus. Children, let us discuss about cranial bones. The cranium or skull is made up of 8 bones that protect the brain and form the head. The cranium, also known as neurocranium, is formed by the superior aspect of the skull. It encloses and protects the brain, meninges and cerebral vasculature. Anatomically, the cranium can be subdivided into roof and a base. Let us see what is a cranial roof. Cranial roof compressed of the frontal, occipital and 2 parietal bones. It is also known as calvarium. Let us see what is cranial base. Cranial base compressed of the frontal, sphenoid, ethmoid, occipital, parietal and temporal bones. These bones articulate with the first cervical vertebrae, atlas and the facial bones and the mandible jaw. Children, let us discuss in detail about each and every cranial bone. First, let us see what is frontal bone. Frontal bone forms the forehead. It is a single bone constituting the anterior part of the calvaria and the higher third part of the forehead. The bone laterally mediates with the zygoma at the frontozygomatic suture. In its vault, it is coronal suture. It mediates with the parietal bones. This bone constitutes a great part of the orbit's roof. The thickening of this bone in the anterior part constitutes the superciliary arches. The curved altitudes provides evidence of the eyebrow. This rim is crossed over by the supraorbital notch transisting the frontal vessels and nerves. The bone compresses the air sinuses, 2 hollow spaces that are lined with mucous membrane found immediately above the orbital margins. The paranasal sinus is mucous membrane with the lining of the air-filled bones cavities. These are the frontal maxillary, ethmoid and sphenoid paranasal sinuses. It mediates with the nose, serving the lightening of the facial skeleton, acting as a voice resonators. This was a brief on skull bones, different types. Children, let us discuss about parietal bones. 2 bones that protect the brain and from the majority of the skull. These are 2 flat bones constituting most of the vault of the skull. It mediates with one another in the midline at the sagittal suture. It mediates anteriorly with the frontal bone at the coronal suture. It site of the joint between the coronal suture and the sagittal suture referred to as to be rigma. These bones posteriorly mediate with the occipital bone at the lambdoid suture at the site of joining the sagittal suture with the lambdoid suture referred to as the lambda. The bones laterally mediate with the squamous temporal bone at the squamous suture. They have paired foramen which is referred to as the parietal foramen and have a Children, let us discuss about temporal bones. Temporal bones. These bones are a paired structures at the base and lateral sides of the skull. Each of these bones compressed this process and parts. Tympanic section compresses the lateral auditory meatus and zygomatic part process constitute the zygomatic arch with the temporal process with the zygomatic bone. And petrous part found in the foundation of the skull. It harbors the internal acoustic meatus and structure of the inner ear. The mastoid process is deemed as the downgrowth from the petrous section and both referred as to petromastoid. Styloid process. This styloid process provides attachment to the ligaments and muscle. Squamous part forms the most superior located and largest section of the temporal bone. It unites the parietal bone to that of the squamous suture, constituting the part of the petrion. The canals of the foramen are present in the bone area. The external acoustic meatus, carotid canal for foramen lacerum, stylomastoid foramen, internal acoustic meatus and facial nerve canal. The temporary bones mediate with the mandibulary bone via the temporomandibular joint. The temporal bones glenoid fossa mediates with the condylar head of the mandible. The anterior periphery of the glenoid fossa is the articulate eminence. Children, let us discuss about occipital bone. The occipital bone protects the back of the brain and supports the head. These are unpaired trapezoid bones that are the main bones of the occiput. Back of the skull, it constitutes a major part of the basilar section of the neurocranium and the cerebellum fully. The bone superiorly mediates with the parietal bones at the lumboid suture, forming a section of the wallet of the skull. It is only the cranial bone inferiorly to the mediate with the cervical spine. It mediates with the sphenoid anteriorly at the base of the skull. This bone comprises three parts: basilar part, squamous part, condylary part. Out of this, the squamous part is the largest one. It is seen posterior to the foramen magnum and is curved from over to downwards. The outer surface has external occipital protuberance and three curved lines called nuchal lines. The superior nuchal lines and the highest nuchal lines run somewhat inferiorly. Further running inferior is the inferior nuchal line. The new internal surface of the squamous section is indicated by the grooves on the internal surface as a result of the venous cranial sinuses, that sigmoid sinuses, transverse sinuses, and the superior sagittal sinuses. The basilar part is seen anterior to the foramen magnum and the next to the petrous section to the temporal bone. It mediates anteriorly with the sphenoid bone. The condylar section is seen lateral to the foramen magnum. It has two kidney-shaped projections which mediate with the first cervical vertebrae. The jugular foramen is seen between the occipital bone and the petrous section of the temporal bone. The hypoglossal nerve leaves the neurocranium via the hypoglossal canal that penetrates through the condylary section of the occipital bone. Children, let us discuss about sphenoid bone. These sphenoid bones support facial muscles. These are single bones located at the center of the skull foundation and are a portion of the middle and anterior cranial focussae. It has several processes which are intricate articulations with the facial and cranial bones found adjacent to it. It mediates with the ethmoid, temporal, frontal, occipital, parietal, zygoma, ulnar, palatine bones and at times to tuberosity of the maxilla. These bones resembles the shape of the butterfly with a great laser ring to the body and the petrigoid plates. Additionally, it has numerous foramen and fissures, optical canal, foramen ovale and the superior orbit fissure. Its body is hollow, forming two cavities distinguished by a fine bony spectrum. The hollow cavities are the sphenoidal air sinuses draining into the superior nasal meatus. On the body's superior surface is the depression for the pituitary gland, referred to as a sella turcica. The body is seen on the roof of the nasal cavity. Children, let us discuss about ethmoid bone. The ethmoid bone forms the eye socket structure and protects the nose. It is a single bone seen in the midsection of the anterior cranial fossa. It establishes a section of the anterior cranial fossa, nasal structure and middle orbit walls, the crista gallia in the anterior cranial fossa. A bony upward projections provides the attachment to the flexor cerebrae. The ethmoid plate that is perpendicular slopes downwards in the midline of the nasal cavity, constituting the anterior and superior part of the nasal septum. The posteriorly it mediates with the vomer and with that of the septal cartilages, establishing the nasal septum. The cerebriform plates of ethmoids mediate laterally and anteriorly with the frontal bone and posteriorly with the sphenoid bone. The olfactory nerve filaments advance via the cerebriform plate. This bone is a pneumatic bone containing ethmoid air cells that drain into the middle of the superior nasal meatus.